These miniatures were printed with the Frozen Mighty 8K 3D printer using free STL files from Colts3D.com. After cleaning and curing them, they were attached to bases that were pre-covered with AK Interactive's Muddy Ground texture. Then it was a trip to the airbrushing station to prime them with a rich ruddy brown before giving them a zenithal spray of mustard yellow and a final lesser zenithal spray of an off-white. Moving to my painting desk, I mix various oil paints with mineral spirits to create multiple washes to stain the foundations laid by the airbrush work. Starting with the dirty yellow, I start adding this in patterns around the bodies of the owlbears. I do not make the same patterns on each one, making them all slightly different in appearance. I repeat the same with a mixture of the previous yellow and some brown. I didn't really plan any of this out beyond using earthy colors and them having woodland bases. I continue the same thing in increasingly dark browns as well as add some brighter yellows, but otherwise the steps remain the same going forward. Some green is then added to the undersides to add tonal variation for shadows and to help sell the woodland bases that will come later. The same green and a few of the darker brown washes that are already on the palette are then used to stain the textured base. The first day of work is then finished after applying a black wash to some areas on the large male owlbear as well as the cub to designate it as a young male. This day consisted of roughly 3 hours for basing the miniature, priming it, airbrush work, and the initial oil stains. This did not include the actual time to print the models, cure, clean them, and to allow some time for the muddy ground texture base on the bases to cure. I let the miniatures sit for close to 24 hours before coming back to the next day and hitting them with a black oil wash all over. Since the previous stains were very thin, they're already dry to the touch, and this black oil wash does not reactivate them. I apply loads of this wash, letting it go wherever it wants, though I aim to keep a light touch against the miniature. I'm still very much a novice with oil paints, and the last project I primarily used oil paints on was a series of disasters. You can find the link for that travesty in the top right corner of your screen now. These oil washes were especially impactful on the large male, adding a nice depth of shadow. After an hour, I come back with Q-tips very lightly moistened in mineral spirits. When I say lightly moistened, I test it against my fingernail, and if I see any spirits running wild, it still has too much on it. I gently wipe away most of the oil wash, leaving the deeper recesses untouched. I then come back with dry makeup sponges and very softly rub around the miniatures, mainly to help dislodge any stray Q-tip fibers that are stuck to them, but also to gently blend together any still wet oil. Mixing and adding the oil wash and then cleaning this excess wash away took less than half an hour, though this was not including the hour the wash was allowed to sit. On the third day for this project, roughly 24 hours since the previous black oil wash was added, I resume with the focus for building some highlights and alterations to the fur patterns. To do so, I take some of the same oil colors that I used previously and add very little touches of it. This paint is thick and I only have a very small amount of mineral spirits in the bristles, but otherwise the paint is undiluted. Then, with a soft brush, I gently buff the splotches to soften them. I constantly wipe the excess oil paint this buffing brush picks up onto a paper towel. It's important to keep in mind that only a few soft touches is needed. Any more and you may remove all of the new color that you just laid down. I repeat this all over the body with lighter tones, working my way up to white on the tips of the feathers and mixing some red tones in here and there. During this time, I also begin to add finer details such as the face patterns and painting the claws, beak, tongue, and eyes. When I got to highlighting the cub and the large male, these highlights were added more like a dry brushing edge highlight as opposed to just stippling taps with the brush. This worked for these two since the patterns of the fur and feathers were more pronounced, making highlighting these two a lot easier as well as quicker to finish. However, I was also a lot more softer with my brush strokes when it came to blurring and smudging these highlights, as I did not want to accidentally push any of these brighter tones down into the recesses. I finish in the eyes and other details, bringing the total work on this day to right around 3 hours. Moving on to the fourth day, I aim to finish the bases, so I start with blacking out the base rim with the matte acrylic, mainly so that it dries quickly. As mentioned earlier, I'm aiming for a forested or woodland feel to match the natural ecology of these supernatural and fiercely aggressive hunters, so the next task is to add grass and fallen leaves. I dab PVA glue around the base, and then take a cheap brush loaded with water and spread that glue around, careful not to get it on the owlbears. I then add flocking in small amounts, trying my best to keep this off the owlbears themselves. This was very tedious, but I feel it was worth it. While the glue was still wet, I also sprinkled in some leaves and gently pressed them down into the glue with a sculpting tool. Because the PVA glue dries transparent, I'm not worried about covering every spot with leaves. I then pull out what has become my basing bits container and make a pile of choice bits from Army Painter, Warm Tree, Red Baker, and Mossland products. My goal is to keep most of these bits short and load the bases up with the massive owlbears standing above them. Then, with super glue, I began adding things together. Once all the bits have been added, I take a couple of Army Painter speed paints and strong tone washes, wet my brush with water, and then apply the speed paints and wash to the basing bits to add some tonal variation. The basing took right at 2 hours worth of work, and left me with Big Papa Owlbear, 3 young daughters, and the baby boy. And we still need Mama Bear. For her base, I need something different, so I take some 1/4-inch foam board and remove the paper on both sides. I then press the bottom of a base that I'm going to use into this foam with enough force to leave an indentation, and then I cut this circle of foam out. With a ballpoint pen, I draw parallel lines to create long wooden planks, and then with a fine-tipped awl, I add lines and curls to create the grain of the wood. I then glue this to the base, and now if you're wondering, Jim, why is Mama Bear hanging out on some wooden planks and not in the woods with her family? It's because her ass done got. She's deader than fried chicken. The only warmth she can bring to this world is to the cat who is now using her as a bed. And this is where I stopped with this project. In total, it took me nearly 9 hours of active work to paint up and base 6 owlbears, which is pretty good considering that's less than 2 hours apiece. They look like I put effort into it, but that's because the oil washes and airbrush did all the heavy lifting. Every step felt like it went by quickly, and I'm really happy with how these came out, and how little effort it took to get them to look decent, though that was in large part due to the excellent sculpting done by the creators. For lessons learned, there's some spots on the bottom necks of a couple of the female bears where I needed to sand down the supports more. Not sure how I missed them, as they're pretty noticeable, but beyond that, I don't have any other regrets. This video was supposed to come out the previous weekend, but due to a massive influx of work at my place of employment, coupled with a damn F1 tornado that came across tearing my chimney cap off, ripping off bits of the barn roof, and hurling my greenhouse 60 feet, I've had other things to attend to. Never mind the trees laid down all over the place. I've got about another weeks of hard work ahead of me, so other videos this month may be delayed depending on how exhausted I am. If you're on the fence about trying oils due to the need for mineral spirits to thin them or how messy they can be, I'd say make the leap. They're different and fun and easy ultimately. The main things I learned are having only a small amount of mineral spirit so you can't spill a lot of it, and have plenty of paper towels. And just make sure to keep it away from anything that would make it combust, and keep it away from carpets, and you'll have yourself a good old time. Lastly, I didn't show the painting of the mama owlbear, but the colors used on her were the same as the others, minus the green shadows, since she's not in the woods. And with that, it's time I bring this video to the end. I hope you learned something or inspired to start your own collection of magical created predators that, despite what the very excellent D&D movie showed, druids cannot shapeshift into owlbears. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, you can easily support the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video.